Welcome back to our electronic course on ethnic studies, an introduction to ethnic studies. And today we're going to be starting a series of lectures based on this book here that you'll see in the background. And it is probably, it's one of the recommended texts. It's a book which is recently published. It's part of the Routledge The Basics series, Race and Ethnicity, and it's written co-authored by two scholars, Kivisto and Kroll, and it is a very short. You'll see that it is less than 150 pages long. It's supplied with a very well-organized index and glossary. I've chosen the book for a number of reasons. It's a recently published book from a very good publisher, and equally importantly for me, as this is a course primarily of directed reading, there is some other online material by one of the authors. They can help you get into the subject area by not only reading this book, particularly the chapters that are most relevant to your interests and your needs, but it's a way, it's nice if we can link YouTube video contents from reputable scholars with recently published books by established publishers that go through the conventional peer review process. So this book, Race and Ethnicity, does a number of things. It defines the subject, and we have dealt enough with issues of the difference between race and ethnicity in other lectures, so that we don't have to do it here and now. But he has some chapters on prejudice and discrimination, the forms of ethnic and racial prejudice and discrimination, the dynamics of inequality. He has a chapter on ethnic conflict and modes of interpretation. Now, we're not going to be talking about all of this content. We're not going to be summarizing all of these chapters, but what we will be doing is taking you through sections of the book that I think are going to be of most interest to Thai students. Just another reminder that this book is on the Google Drive. You have access to that. You don't have to buy it. You can use it here. And so you'll see that book is highlighted in the Google Drive. Okay, so let's go into full screen now as we move ahead. So we've dealt with this material a number of times, and there is absolutely no point in labouring this point about the multiple ways that ethnicity, conceptions of ethnicity and race can be, have been understood, are understood, and are likely to continue to be understood and misunderstood. There's no reason for us to labour that point here now. But if you do need one place to refer to the important differences, then go back to page 10. And what I would like to do is to introduce the idea of nationalism and of the relationship between ethnicity and nationalism, and we will deal with a number of case studies of ethno-nationalism in other lectures, and we will be revisiting a number of ethno-nationalist conflicts in other lectures later on, but let's just take the time to read some of the ways in which Kivisto and Kroll talk about ethnicity and nationalism. So he asked the question, what is nationalism, what is the relation, and what is its relationship to ethnicity? In answer to the first question, nationalism is an ideology that defines a collectivity composed of people who are seen to be part of the same political community. The basis of the existence of a community may relate to language, religion, ethnicity, what are seen to be shared civic values, or a combination of all of these features. Not surprisingly, depending on the society and historical period in question, the answer to the second session will vary widely. There are places and times when ethnicity and nationalism seem to be fused. They're fused together in societies where there is a significant level of ethnic commonality, at least perhaps perceived commonality, across the nation at a specific time. In these cases, ethnicity plays a role in forming and solidifying national identity. Nations that have until fairly recently been quite homogeneous ethnically include Nordic countries, with Iceland, due to its small size and remoteness, being one of the purest examples. Far more typical, however, are situations where there is ethnic diversity within nations, and this leads to a decoupling of ethnicity and nationalism, or at least a minimalising of the significance of the connection. At the other end of the spectrum, from a country such as Iceland are historic settler states such as Australia, Canada, New Zealand and the US. Now remember, I'm a New Zealander. Of course, the level of diversity and the nature of the link between ethnic groups and national identity not only varies from place and time, but also by the perception and social location of the observer. One way to begin to understand the relationship between ethnicity and nationalism is to look at the historical formulations of nations and the role that ethnicity may or may not have played in the formation. The Ethnic Origin of Nations by Anthony Smith in 1986 argues that in the formation of modern states, the roots of these nations are to be found, both in general ways and in many specific cases, in the model of ethnic community prevalent in much of the recorded history across the globe. So Smith argues that the values and traditions and symbols and other cultural material found within groups of people provide much of the materials necessary for modern nations to develop. And he uses the term ethne to refer to the ethnic communities and symbols that played a foundational role in the creation of modern states. From his perspective, the relationship between ethnicity and nationalism is historical and sequential. While Smith believes that ethnic communities played a role in forming nations in the past, his historical relationship between ethnicity and nationalism is not well suited to explain the relationship between ethnicity and nationalism in these same nations today. A significant factor in trying to understand the relationship between ethnicity and nationalism is whether nationalist ideology is defined in civic or ethnic terms. So a focus on this distinction leads to a productive typology of nationalist ideologies. And these highlight how and where ethnicity plays an important role in the nation. This typology of the different kinds of nationalist identity can be found in the Introduction to Ethnic Conflict. The author Milton Esman discusses 3 different variations of nationalist ideology, highlighting how and where ethnicity plays an important role. So the first is ethno-nationalism, the belief that any people that aspires to political self-determination and self-rule is a nation and as such is entitled to independent statehood. The second is civic nationalism, a territorial concept defining the nation as all peoples, regardless of ethnic prominence, who accept the duties and responsibilities of citizenship. Thirdly, syncretic nationalism. In multinational states that include 2 or more nations, syncretic nationalism is an ideology that attempts to construct a new, inclusive national sentiment that will subordinate and eventually supplant the original national sentiment of its component peoples. Each of these 3 variables of nationalist ideology has different implications for the relationship between ethnicity and nationalism. The concept of ideal types is mentioned here because these 3 variants are more pure and distinct than we expect to find them actually mapping this typology onto existing modern states. Many states, for example the US, believe in the ideology of civic nationalism, where every person, regardless of ethnicity, can be a full citizen. And yet these citizens often have long histories of political and social exclusion, and we're going to be talking about that later on, limiting which groups of people can take full advantage of these rights and responsibilities contained within citizenship amongst the nations they continue to be a part of. So let's take a break now, and we will continue with the issue of ethnicity and religion.